Hey, what's up, everybody? I am Justin Young with HoopSeen.com, and he is Jerry Meyer. And together, a long time ago, I think probably when TV was in black and white and we only got AM radio, Jerry, we worked together at Rivals.com, covering the country in high school basketball. And last week, or I guess a couple weeks ago, we went back and re-ranked and reevaluated the class of 2006. And we had so much fun, we wanted to do it all over again for the class of 2007. And really, Jerry, I think we both kind of realized, and going back and looking at it, this was really like, man, these are some freaking great classes that we had to really cover and have a front row seat to watch these guys. Has that kind of been, as you've kind of seen this, these notes come through and we revisit on just how good of an era this was for high school basketball?
I would agree. This 2007 class, pretty amazing if you ask me, especially at the top. Like you take the top 40 or even at 50 because, oh my God, I'm drawing a blank, but Evan helped me, skinny
Evan
guy.
Turner.
Yeah, like even a guy like that was barely top 50, right? Now,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
might should add him higher. I mean, of course we should have probably, or we should have, but
Yeah.
I don't know so much about 51 through 150. It might have been really good, but you take a top 50. I think the 2007 top 50 would be tough to beat. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
The depth of this class is astronomical, really. When you really scale back and you look at it, like I've got the data here just to kind of throw it out there to your point. It actually, believe it or not, is on par with 2006, that there are 47 players drafted into the NBA. But the difference, though, of those 47, 30 of those guys were first round draft picks and 14 lottery picks out of this class. So to your point, to go to the top 50, I mean, 50 guys essentially were picked by the teams in the NBA draft, which doesn't mean you're always an NBA player.
Between those two classes, you're saying with those two classes
No,
combined?
this is just this class. Each class had that kind of depth of talent in 2 years. You had over basically 100 guys make it to the NBA out of two back-to-back classes. So it's a pretty unbelievable
That's
number.
extraordinary, I would say.
Yeah, kind of an
Not
anomaly.
necessarily drafted, but made it.
Unbelievable. Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Uh,
So let's
I don't think
kind of set the
unbelievable is too
stage.
strong a word. I can't believe I'm hearing that. That is
It's
a lot of dudes, man.
a lot of dudes, and I think as
They
we
draft 60,
right, exactly,
50 dudes to
60,
get in
yeah,
there. That's pretty crazy.
yeah. It was an unbelievable
Good
era
data. Yeah.
of talent that came through. So to kind of set the table, I think it is important for us to kind of recap a little bit who our top 25 was on Rivals.com at the time in 2007. Our final rankings, and I'll kind of slowly kind of go through. This was our top 10. Number 1 was Michael Beasley. Eric Gordon was number 2. Derrick Rose was number 3. OJ Mayo came in at number 4. Kyle Singler, number 5. Kevin Love at number 6. Bill Walker, number 7. DeAndre Jordan, number 8. Dante Green at number 9. And number 10 was JJ Hickson. So our top 10, and we're going to talk about it quite a bit here, was pretty incredible. And this is where, if it gives you any context to how good this class was, number 11 was James Harden. So if that gives you some sort of context at the time, James Harden was number 11. Anthony Randolph was number 12. Jared Bayless, 13. Nick Calathis, 14. Austin Freeman, 15. Costa Kufos, 16. 17, Patrick Patterson. Matt Coswalt, number 18. Number 19, Chandler Parsons. 20 was Big Craig Brackens. 21, Jamel Horn. Johnny Flynn, the bane of existence for Timberwolves fans. Number 22, 23, Blake Griffin. 24, Solomon Alibi. And rounding it out at number 25 was Austin Day, who went to Gonzaga and had a cup of coffee in the NBA. But man, that's pretty damn good. That's pretty damn good top 25, Jerry Meyer.
Yep. I agree.
How, like,
I mean, is it definitely the best, or is there a class that can beat
I
that?
would argue
I haven't scoured through them.
This was pretty good.
Jumps at me. I would get behind this one for my knowledge as the best.
I would think so, from top to bottom. And I think for us in our top 25,
I would give 25 is what I'm talking.
Yeah, I think I would give us a solid A. I think really when you look at it, the only things that were really glaring, I mean, now to your point, you get a little recency bias, was Harden at number 11, but Austin Freeman at 15, just had a solid career at Georgetown, was like a part-time starter. Jamel Horn at 21, Solomon Alibi at 24, maybe Matt Coswell at 18, but everybody else, man, they had a more than a cup of coffee or a cup of coffee in the NBA. So overall, I think I'd give us an A to maybe even an A minus, just because of those guys. But that's grading with a very, very tough.
Well, that's two different things. I mean, that's grading us.
Yeah,
I think we did do a good job ranking.
yeah.
In fact, I thought about this when I was prepping. I think we were well ahead of the curve on a lot of guys. Like
I think so. I'm glad you brought that up.
Parsons, we had guys ranked ahead before people realized it. Like James Harden. If we're grading us as a company, I thought we were ahead of the curve on this class with a lot of these guys. And then whether we got them in the right order or not, I'm giving these guys an A plus.
I think you said something in our last
talent of any of the classes.
You said something in our last pod that was interesting. It was our first, like, we were still trying to figure out who we were, to use a comparison, as a player, right? We were kind of freshmen, right? Maybe we were first semester sophomores of trying to figure out,
we're developing a methodology.
Yeah. In this class, I think it really kind of came to a head, to your point, of maybe bigger wings or more versatile guys. And I think
we learned some things too.
We did. We definitely learned some things. So I think the thing that we've got to start with, at least, is we've got to start at the very top with Michael Beasley. Let's talk about him as a prep prospect. He was our number one guy in a class that had some pretty dominant guys. We had an MVP, with two MVPs in this class, with Derrick Rose and James Harden. And I think we've got to explain first why Michael Beasley was our number one guy. Feel free to kind of jump in right here of why you felt so strong about him being number one. I know I was pretty strong. You didn't.
I wanted Derrick Rose.
You wanted Derrick Rose. Well, okay. Well,
that major, because I thought it was becoming a point guard game for one, and I thought Derrick Rose was the freakiest point guard I ever seen. I thought Michael. I mean, that top three, Beasley, Gordon, Rose, unbelievable.
Yeah.
Any of them were capable of being number one, but.
Okay, well, let's talk about Derrick Rose. Yeah, let's talk about that.
Well, we can talk about Derrick Rose. I was going to do it in relation to Beasley. I thought Beasley was a freakish player, and if it's about interior scoring, rebounding, and mobility for a power forward, he was extraordinary. I just found more value in a point guard who had freakish athleticism and the game that Derrick Rose had. I just preferred him, but I thought Beasley was a little too late. And that was part of why he wasn't such a dominant pro. Like Kansas State, you camp him under the basket. He gets you 20 rebounds. He's just beasting people, too powerful. He's an interior scorer. He was never comfortable shooting a long-range ball. He would do it super slow release, kind of like a Zion.
Sure.
His outside shot, like Zion brings more than Michael brought. Michael didn't have that ticker, at least not once he left Kansas State. His foot speed, I think he had trouble defending in the NBA. It's almost like if he had come around 15 years earlier, then whoa, right?
Sure.
Because power forward was kind of the position. Didn't really have the quickness and the ball handling to be that initiator as a small forward on the wing. So kind of needed more shooting range, amongst maybe other things.
And that's why I think it's been interesting as we look back at these classes, we have seen this evolution of the game, right? Of became a little less position specific, right? We have a little bit more versatility with our players. And to your point of why Derrick Rose was so high for you is because it was becoming a point guard game. Before we get into that, I think the question really gets begged is why the heck did we have Michael Beasley number one?
Well, because there are other people involved in this besides us.
Sure. that probably wasn't a question
I wasn't expecting that question, but if you're going to ask it, I'm going to give an honest answer.
Yeah.
We didn't have the final vote.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the freaking answer to it. And but I think Michael Beasley was a trip, dude. This whole class was kind of phenomenal. I mean,
Yeah.
like a Bill Walker, just so many types. Then you got OJ, who I was kind of over AJ by OJ by now, but you know the name he was. Yeah, really phenomenal list. And
From a
Eric
prep,
Gordon was one of the freakier guards I'd ever
yeah.
seen. Oh
From a
my God.
prep standpoint, there were so many guys that were so unique when you look at this class. I mean, Beasley, I thought Beasley, now Beasley was one of those guys too that this was also a class where we saw so many guys playing up for such a long time, where our body of work for these
A
guys,
lot of well-known names.
yeah, we had 3 years of prep basketball all over the country, really, is where we start to see, like, I remember seeing Beasley really all over the place. I saw him in California, and I saw him in Vegas, and I saw him in did he play in Kansas? I mean, just literally everywhere. And the OJ tour was a true barnstorming tour all over the country. And Kevin Love with his team.
It was a little barnstormish.
It was. And I think that's
And you didn't have the set, and this was before you had the set shoe line.
Yeah.
Alienation of teams. And so you had some cross pollination. I think it was like the beginning.
Yeah,
Of
it was
kind of separating the shoe company stuff.
Well, which is not
a random name while it's on my head. I want to throw it out, like a Jeff Teague,
yeah,
who's out in the high 4 stars. We didn't know about him. Now he just came in all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Just I remember this being a fun summer of scouting.
This was a very fun summer. Yeah.
As far as seeing great players.
I would, for me,
and a lot of competition. Teams were like
so much.
They were joining up like power teams. You remember, like like you put in the notes, the duos. That Eric Gordon, who was it? Eric Gordon and Derrick Rose,
Yeah.
and they're going against OJ Mayo and Bill
Yeah.
Walker. Man, that was out of sight.
That was fittingly for Las Vegas, right? This was Mike Tyson. This is Floyd Mayweather. I mean, it was the premiere for grassroots basketball, the premiere. Let's talk about Derrick Rose for a second. Let's talk about his greatness. The Derrick Rose that people know now, I don't think there's any sort of recollection or understanding of to really truly how good he is. And I've heard you say this in multiple conversations that we've had over the years. He's the best point guard that you've ever seen at the high school level, the freakiest. Walk me back to a couple of things. The first time that you saw him, and is there a signature moment for Derrick Rose that you look back and you're like, holy crap, this dude is on a different planet comparative to everybody else?
It's a great question. It might have been a deal where I can't really identify a moment because I was so overwhelmed by the first moment, and it was kind of otherworldly.
Yeah.
And then to see it keep happening, we finally had to accept that's what Derrick Rose is. Derrick Rose is one of the most electric, athletic, dynamic players I'd ever seen. And then to put the ball in his hands, and he's your point guard.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, everyone can associate the younger people, the athleticism of like a Westbrooks. Well, I would take Derrick over that, especially if you put it.
I agree.
Derrick wasn't just a straight liner. Derrick was lateral. He was vertical. He was horizontal, and he was too athletic. He hurt himself because I was always scared of that. I've never seen a guy make more moves while he was up in the air. Me and my buddy Max Bryan, who kind of like vicariously got into what we do. And he's a hoop head and was a college baller and everything. We coined the term air moves. Derrick Rose had air moves. That's how high he could jump.
I love
he
it.
was doing like 10 different moves while I was up in the air. Like, how are you going to land proper?
Yeah.
He jumped too high, too electric. I think that ended up, he was too athletic. But yeah, I'd never seen anything like that. And then he had game. And then I think when I really started to appreciate him, because at first you're like, man, this dude's just like some circus freak show. I thought he was a winner. And like he proved that when he became MVP. Injuries derailed him, which leads to another little segment thought or segue thought. Not that you're necessarily ready to segue. But when we do the re-ranking, looking at that, it's hard to judge like how important is how long a guy's
Yeah,
career is. You follow what I'm saying?
I
Because
totally
Derrick
follow where
Rose,
you're at.
man, you know, you
We
can
kind
make
of
an
talked
argument.
about it briefly
You
with
can make an argument of Derrick Rose over Harden
totally,
if
totally,
you take out longevity.
Totally. It's
Does
funny,
that make
like
sense to you?
roll with me because I like where your head's at.
Yeah, I mean, just a philosophical, and that's about re-ranking. But like, it's tough to predict how long a guy's career is going to last.
Sure. Like, let's, okay, roll with me here. The Beatles were a band for 9 years. 9 years. 9 years. That's it. The Rolling Stones have been a band for 50 plus years, right?
Yeah.
So naturally, Rolling Stones are going to have way more number one hits. The Rolling Stones are going to have way more memories. The Beatles only toured for 6 of those years that they were a band, right? And so to your point, right? It's well.
I would take the Beatles.
You would take the
I love
Beatles.
the Rolling
Exactly.
Stones, but
Exactly. We would all. I think everybody.
For what they did in 9 years, and for what I value, it's not so much the. I don't really need to watch Mick Jagger dance. I think it's cool he can. I mean,
Yeah.
no one needs to watch me dance. I can still dance at 53, but yeah, I would vote Beatles. Maybe kind of how I lean towards Derrick Rose because he got an MVP. He did enough.
He did enough, and he definitely
was
ushered in a new
you
style.
talk about a player that just kind of like like blew my mind. And
Russell
as a
Westbrook
point guard, I would try to imagine myself guarding that.
Right. Yeah. How do you?
That
You
would be
couldn't
like you're the big guy. You might have been imagining guarding Beasley. They were all great, but wow, Derrick Rose was he really blew my mind. Yeah.
he was a definite, and we used it before, a unicorn. I think he ushered in a whole new style. The reason
Yeah.
why John Wall
He
was our number
pivotal.
one player,
Right, and then
was because of
Russell,
Derrick
and then
Rose.
all these athletic point
Yeah.
guards.
No
But
question. Why?
the Greg Paulises don't get ranked anymore.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
You don't
That's
need
why
the
for me,
guy
I
who
love
make
De'Aaron
one change.
Fox and
Who has to make 6 change of directions in the backcourt and then dribble over towards the bench and make that entry pass to the wing.
yeah.
Days of point guard player over. Point guard's got to create the offense, and he's got to push the tempo. The game's changed, man.
I think when I look back in my career, some of my most favorite moments from a competitive standpoint came when Derrick Rose was on the floor, whether it was Las Vegas or whether it was when Derrick Rose and Eric Gordon played together against Tyreke Evans. I mean, some of it, like it was one of the few times in my entire career that I squashed, like our job, and our job was a little different. You I think were more of the sniper, and I think I was like more of the machine gun guy. Like you really keyed on the key guys at the very top, and I covered a little bit more of the masses, right? And that was kind of our balance.
Yeah,
I think
you were doing a lot more of the journalist work too.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
But Derrick Rose,
we have different roles. Yeah.
I had to stop what I was doing and drive wherever I needed to go if we were in the same place, because we had to go sit there and we just watched. We had to go be fans, which I think we did a really good job of never being fanboys. But I think when Derrick Rose came around, we did a really good job of just being like, we're just watching this dude be amazing.
It just reminds me of a story. You're talking about the fan thing when Bill Walker dunked all over Davon Jefferson 2 times under the table. I think we were all like hitting each other with our knees and pounding on each other. Like, don't show it. But it was just like, oh my gosh, like this class brought a lot of those moments. Man.
It has so
many. Like Kevin Love's doing, like, how's this big fat white dude doing this? Like there was just a lot of eye-opening, and then this Kyle Singler guy, he's just doing everything out there. I mean, just down the list, man. Like freaking
it's remarkable.
DeAndre Jordan. You're like, where did this guy come from?
Yeah, remarkable.
Like, it was just
Kingwood.
And Nick Calathis. Like I watched him account for the first 23 points of one of his games.
Yeah.
I mean, we got Blake Griffin down at 23. Holy cow! I mean,
crazy.
We saw a lot of great players, even like an Austin Freeman. I know it didn't work out in the NBA, and I learned from that and see why. Oh, but goodness gracious, he was fun to watch, man.
Yeah.
That big-bodied guard, just having his way out there.
Yep. Again, another duo played with Michael Beasley. Like we had all these great 1-2 punches.
Yeah, he did. Right.
And this was the era too. I don't know the year that LeBron went to Miami, but it probably fell in this category where guys now wanted to play with other guys. to what now we see with the NBA, where everybody has.
I think there was some sort of
yeah.
Synergy there or something. Yeah.
Let's talk about Eric Gordon for a second. Kind of the quiet superstar, where both Derrick Rose and Eric Gordon, personality wise, are pretty quiet, reserved guys. You didn't hear really a lot. They didn't really bring a lot of attention to it.
They weren't big talkers,
but they were super competitive. And I know with Eric Gordon now is just kind of a people may know just as a veteran, but he guy's stuck in the NBA. And as a prep star, again, going back to this idea of what guards were, he was big, he was strong, he was physical, could shoot the crap out of the ball.
Athletic, right.
Freak. Yeah, an absolute
I think he was freakish for a shooting guard. And I mean, just for a basketball player, he's freakish. I'm with you on that, man. I think all three of those at the top. I mean, goodness gracious. But with Gordon, well, just one thing I think I missed is how good a shooter he was.
Yeah.
Because his athleticism and that big, thick body.
Yeah.
And if I had to say one lesson I learned from this class, or it helped me learn it, because I still have to remind myself, a player's body is so important. You look at the guys that didn't get it done at that level we thought they didn't, typically too skinny. Maybe you can say, I think Austin Freeman, I think he was a little too thick.
But he wasn't quick enough. And
he didn't have that athletic pop.
I think a good comp is
and Eric Gordon was that first shooting guard we kind of saw that was thick. And dude, he was just like a Mack truck, and he was electric. And I don't know if we realized how good he could shoot the basketball.
Yeah, which is saying something considering we had number 2 overall.
That's what he's sticking on, that body and that shooting. Yeah.
Yeah, dynamic. Again, he played with some great teams too as a prep. Played with Greg Oden and Mike Conley for a little bit when he was younger. Then he switched over to Derrick Rose. Was a guy that absolutely competed. And it was also
Daquan Cook, right?
Daquan Cook, yep, no doubt. Yep. Unbelievable teams.
Our point guard.
Yep. I think when we look back, I think it'll be really difficult to find, and this will be a fun exercise. And if people are watching, leave a comment below, like who's some of the best backcourts that you've ever seen. But Derrick Rose and Eric Gordon, I think, are in cement, I think, for both you and I, of the best backcourt.
For the AAU. Or travel ball.
Yeah, for AAU, for travel ball, yeah.
I don't know what could have touched that, man.
Yeah, dynamic duo.
That was
let's keep it moving. Let's talk about Kevin Love. To me, I don't think there's any secret. What's interesting, I lived in Oregon for a little bit, multiple times in my life, and I was fortunate enough to be there and have a front row seat. I was there for Kevin Love's very first varsity game. And then Kyle Singler from Medford, Oregon, 3 or 4 hours down the road, I-5. The state of Oregon is not a state that creates a lot of basketball prospects, high-level basketball prospects. And here, the same year, we had 2 of the very best in state history at the same time. 2 totally different guys. Kevin Love, big personality, really well liked. Played on this amazing Southern California All-Stars team. I would argue the best rebounder that I've ever seen at the prep level. I saw him pull down, I think it was like 27 rebounds at City of Palms in a game, like just an absolute dynamic guy. Then his outlet passes were almost like, internet legends stories with him. And then here you had Kyle Singler, who was a USA basketball guy, and going to Duke would had a little bit of cachet with that. We put Kyle Singler ahead of Kevin Love, which I remember at the time was a little controversial. What was your memory of Kyle Singler in your value? What's that?
And wrong.
And wrong. We were wrong.
And as part of the learning thing, I couldn't quite get the Kevin Love thing at the time. He was a good sandbagger too. He would look so pitiful in warm-ups. And then if the game didn't matter, because he just didn't have that natural freaky pop.
Sure.
But he had it's learning how important the body is. Sure. Control horizontal space. People think that rebounds. I would challenge any fan, Nick, next time you watch a basketball game, jot down or have a drink take a shot every time, or just a sip of beer, whatever, or some lemonade, whatever you do. Chronicle it. How many rebounds are taken above the rim?
Yeah.
I mean, we remember those, we think those. It's all about rebounding beneath the rim. It's controlling horizontal space. And Kevin Love controlled horizontal space.
Elite.
And he had great hands. He had skill. And it wasn't like he was unathletic. But it's so easy in basketball to get enamored with that boing, boing up and
Yeah.
straight ahead. And what about lateral quickness? You know, it's kind of like I didn't think Beasley, you know, I was kind of critical of his lateral quickness. But basketball is much more than running. It's not track. It's not running straight ahead and then doing the high jump at the rim. And Kevin Love certainly has helped me learn that lesson.
You know, this class really did go the ranges of the type of, to your point, Derrick Rose, who is, I would argue, if he wanted to be an Olympic athlete in some category, he could probably be very successful.
Something.
Where Kevin Love was way more of his
Shot
athleticism
put.
was different. It was more technical, right? It was more about physics and angles and using his big butt to block people out. He wasn't the body type that he is now. I mean, he was a thick kid.
He didn't have them air moves, but he has more of a foundational physics.
I like that. I'm going to use that for my own personal scouting report. You know?
Yeah.
But when we also talk about freak athletes, and you mentioned him, is Bill Walker, who was the running mate for OJ Mayo, who we are going to talk about. But Bill Walker, I would think, I know for me, he's probably one of the 5 best, maybe freakiest / most intimidating athletes I've ever seen in person.
I would agree.
Yeah.
He was a hateful dude.
In a good way, right? Wanted to punish
He didn't
him.
like to get touched, but he really liked to touch you in an impactful way, you know, on the court. Remember?
Yeah.
Part of his intimidation, he'd be like, he was just killing people, just, you know, teabagging them, dunking all over them, bull rushing the rim. And then, but as soon as someone, you know, initiated contact with him, it was like, how dare you touch me? And that was kind of part of the gangster intimidation he had.
Sure.
He was something else.
He was our number 7 ranked guy in the class, which I think Bill Walker now, I don't even know if there's enough internet footage on YouTube to go back and watch him. But
so
he was
the 2 dunks aren't on there.
I mean, the baseline was a dangerous place to be when he was on.
Those are 2 of the craziest, man. He called Davon Jefferson out, and then just, oh my gosh. Yeah, I agree with you. Bill Walker was he was a phenom.
Injuries slowed him down. He had a couple cups of coffee in the NBA. Played for my brother for a little bit.
Shoot, and he jumped too high. It's hard to land. I'm telling you, man.
It's hard.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a good.
That's what I've heard.
It's a good pivot to our number 4 guy overall at the time was OJ Mayo, and I think OJ. I have a lot of thoughts on OJ. I think he had a pretty solid NBA career. He kind of disappeared off the face of the earth. The pressures that were put on that young man as a high school player were pretty unique at the time. To give context for people,
he was like the first, man.
He was really the first.
I remember teaching when I was teaching high school before I even got into scouting. I was coaching, teaching NBA high school here in Nashville, and they threw me a couple computer classes along with my English, and all them kids were in there looking up OJ Mayo the whole time. That's how I found out who OJ was. You know, because I was a scout then. I didn't have a national picture. I'm just trying to win high school basketball games. And dude, them kids would run in there, and as soon as they got their work done, they would hurry up and get their work done. Then all they did was watch OJ Mayo highlights. So, yeah, OJ was like kind of the first.
He was the first viral player for sure.
I think he was like,
yeah. And everywhere that he went,
Lou Williams had a little bit of that.
A little bit. Maybe
but OJ was your first, like.
And again, he was a barnstorming tour across the country, and his circle was really tight with the D1 Greyhounds.
Like a mercenary. People were paying him just play a game with us, man.
He did. He played with the Miami Tropics one year at the Classic. And he walked in, and it was like literally going back to like the analogy with the Stones and the Beatles, that Mick Jagger showed up on stage with another band. You're like, wait, what? he's doing what? There's some pictures out there with him in Tropics uniforms that are pretty cool. But OJ Mayo was a hell of a basketball player. He really was. He wasn't.
Yes, he was. You don't do that out of magic. Yeah, he could ball. Yeah.
But he had so many people involved. Obviously, we know about, which ironically now, the whole USC deal, it's perfectly fine basically now, the way that NIL works, and he would have been okay. But OJ Mayo, I still think, you know what's funny with OJ? I loved dealing with OJ. He was always super respectful. He gave me really good access, gave me really good information, gave me really good stories. I think at the core, he was just a kid trying to like understand this crazy world that was around him. And I know his upbringing and different things that maybe probably, caused his life to go in the direction that it was. But I always found OJ Mayo on a one-to-one to be really enlightening, a really highly intelligent young man that, all things considered, was a very, very, very good basketball player in an era now that I don't know if kids can even respond that way. Like I look at a guy like Mikey Williams, who has more followers on Instagram than like Delta, Home Depot, like all these Fortune 500 companies combined. You have one kid that carries such a weight that has nothing to do with basketball. And OJ was kind of this first guy that really did that. But his game, and again, going back to what you're saying with Derrick Rose, OJ Mayo was freaking competitive, bro. That dude wanted to compete.
Yeah.
And there was a moment in Vegas where he was playing, I think they were playing Southern California All-Stars, and he hit a 3-point shot and got fouled. And Reebok had this huge banner on the scorers table that said where it all gets settled. And OJ goes up to it, slaps the table, and just kind of goes back, knocks down the shot. They win the game. But like he had some real superstar potential there, no doubt about it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, he pulled up from three, looked like Eric Gordon, and Derrick Rose had him, and he got fouled on the legend.
Yeah, well, that's right. They were playing. You're right. They were playing Eastern. Yeah.
Yeah, it was special. I don't know if he would see stuff like that now today. It was very personal. These guys were like the personal. First real superstars, I thought.
Yeah.
Like we entered superstar territory with this class.
You know what's funny, Jerry? I look back, I see some videos. I found this really cool documentary. In fact, I ran into Chris Rivers around Christmas time at the Tart Classic, and I said he was at the time was an executive for Reebok and really was kind of Sonny Vaccaro's right-hand man and really put all these matchups together.
He was big. Yeah, he did a lot of stuff.
Yeah, visionary. Really,
he was very impactful for sure. Man.
Totally agree. That gym in Las Vegas was packed to the brim. Do you remember the lines that you had to get through to get into?
Oh, it was nuts.
And now, part of it,
because I think it was the last year Sonny wasn't going to do that tournament anymore, right?
Yeah,
I think that was part of it. But it was these players.
It was these players.
They were superstars, man.
The characters of the movie mattered back then.
Yeah.
Not like they do now.
There were so many high school kids in that gym. Yeah. It wasn't like the Peach Jam where they just want to walk around and mac on girls and stuff like they're at the mall. So instead of going to the mall, we're going to go to the Peach Jam and get our laughs. These kids in Vegas are like sitting in them seats, like, whoa, like it was a different thing, man.
And there was none of this. There was none of this. Like when LeBron scored, there were no phones being held up the whole time. We were watching to experience it in the moment.
Yeah. Sure.
Let's talk about Nick Calathis for a second. You mentioned him earlier.
Yeah, one of my favorites. Yeah.
One of the all-time greats, really one of the best European players we've seen in the last, 2.5 decades. Has gone over to Greece and really made an absolute career for himself. Multi-MVP, multi-EuroLeague champion. You mentioned earlier with when we re-rank, how important do you think it is to look at the just in totality of basketball? I think it's really critical when we look at Nick Calathis, even in context versus OJ Mayo, right? When we look back, is Nick Calathis now more valuable of a player than OJ Mayo? I think the answer is yeah, of course, because he's still playing and he's still winning.
Yeah, interesting point. That's what makes it tough.
But explain it real quick to give context. What was it about Calathis as a prep prospect that made him so appealing for you? I know he's one of your favorite guys.
Yeah, I mean, because I was kind of like him. Not a real. I mean, not near as good, but not like the under-athletic white guy. Man, he was so smart. He's well coached with Coach Toppin.
Yeah.
Squad, like they had a structure. Like Nick's a dude who needs a structure.
Yeah.
I needed a structure because I'm going to maximize that structure. And he was great at that. He was such a clever passer. He had a lot to do with making Chandler Parsons.
Yeah.
Just a highly valued prospect, I believe. One, but just by example.
Sure.
And osmosis, and then the way he fed him on the court. Like Nick was that guy that knew, like, oh man, dude's having a bad day. Him and his girl ain't getting along that well. I need to get him a couple shots early to get him going. Like Nick was on that like special mental level as a playmaker, point guard, or I know what I need to get here, or maybe some games I need to come out and do the scoring. He was just thinking on a level that other players weren't thinking on. Just so highly skilled. Always felt like he was on that verge of being like just overwhelmed athletically, but then he would figure it out and squirm out of there.
Yeah,
You're like, how do you do that? So it was just kind of
he
entertaining.
was.
So to me, it was just very entertaining. It's like, if you don't look at the bodies and how high they can jump, because Nick, I don't even know if I ever even saw Nick dunk. It's kind of like Steve Nash's in a way.
Yeah, yeah.
Scott Skiles. I'm going down my pantheon of dudes that I looked up to, and I could relate to, or like I thought I could relate to, felt like I wanted to relate to him. But man, Nick was special that way. Because you look at the numbers,
I think
and
he would have
Nick's
been a
like
really
the best
fun
player
guy.
out there.
Yeah,
I just don't think he had the body and the strength, number one. I don't think it was jumping. Although jumping for a point guard has become much more important because you're attacking the
sure.
rim and you have to get up. But back then, I mean, that was kind of like when it was coming in. Like, yeah, vertical prowess. Don't get me wrong.
But you know
Game ain't
what though?
just horizontal, but he didn't have the strength. I don't think he could guard. I mean,
Yeah,
he's
well, it's interesting.
Florida.
It's actually a really great time to talk about James Harden because their game styles, honestly, at that level, Calathes is playing more of what we see now from James
They're
Harden.
pretty similar, yeah.
Similar style, and maybe we buried the lead a little bit because I think when we re-ranked this class, I think it comes down to Derrick Rose and James Harden being the number one guy. I mean, James Harden was our number 11.
Without a doubt.
Right? What's that?
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah.
Yeah, and so
I think
James
if
Harden,
you throw in the longevity, it's James Harden for sure, dude. He's still one of the best players.
sure, no doubt. I
Very
think
bad.
the question when we've talked about we didn't talk about Dante Green, who was number 9. I think was probably one of our, we probably need to
going to Syracuse playing a zone didn't help him.
Yeah,
totally too thin, and didn't like to defend.
Well, James Harden being number 11, and I think we had so much wow above him, and all these guys. Each guy had his own. And when James Harden was coming up, he obviously didn't have the beard, and he played out in California for Ebo, and there was one.
He didn't have a ton of exposure. He came on late. We didn't know how good a shooter he was. We knew he could shoot. No, I think we knew how good a shooter he was. We didn't know he'd grow to be 6'6" and have that just give me the ball. I can freaking do it.
I remember this conversation I had with Jim Herrick. There was an event in Las Vegas at the end of July where they took the champion of the Adidas tournament, the champion of the Reebok tournament, and the champion of Hal Pastner's event. And they all played together in like this, one-day round robin type of thing. And James Harden's team won the whole thing. And Jim Herrick, who was at UCLA and Georgia and multiple places, a longtime guy, really smart guy. I remember talking to him after the game, and I said, Coach, what is it about James Harden? And he said, and he told me, and I don't know if I thought it was like kind of coach speak after the game. He goes, he will be a multi-year MVP or multi-year all-star in the NBA, and he'll be a dynamic guy. And he was right. He was spot on. And I probably should have,
we had him 11.
We had him 11 in an unbelievable class. Now, JJ Hickson at 10, that's definitely my own bias.
It's not that embarrassing, but it's a miss, dude.
Yeah.
He probably should be number 1.
But I mean,
not an easy job, is it?
No, it's not an easy job. And I think it goes back to
hard to predict the future in a lot of things.
Well, it's the star power, though, I think, to our point where we had to go watch OJ play Derrick Rose, and we had to go watch Michael Beasley play Kevin Love. We had to go.
I hardly saw Harden in high school.
Yeah.
I remember watching on TV. I think I saw like 1 or 2 tournaments. Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of falls in that.
Exposure is something.
Yeah.
It'd be nice if we could watch them all equal.
Totally.
It's part of the time.
Two more guys I want to bring up here. Blake Griffin, you mentioned earlier, was our number 23 guy.
Yeah.
And Blake Griffin, though, I think all of us, we always kind of remember, I remembered him as a prep player, kind of being a tough guy. I remember he took a shot to the face one time and like had just like this, probably need to go get stitches. And I don't know. I know why he kept playing because it was travel ball. All rules were kind of thrown out the window. But he was always a freak athlete, was always a guy. I feel like we probably had him ranked higher than everybody else at 23. I feel like maybe the industry had him like in the top 50. But for a 10-year period, Blake Griffin, I would argue, was probably one of the 10 most recognizable guys. Maybe like 6-year period in the NBA is one of the most recognizable guys in the NBA. And Jimmy Butler was a guy too that nobody knew much about when junior college, coming out of Tomball, Texas. Was a guy that
not even on our radar, really.
If anybody said they saw him, they're just not telling the truth. Nobody saw him.
I know I didn't see him.
Nobody saw him. I don't even know if our guy Jim Hicks out of Houston saw much of Jimmy Butler, to be quite frank. So, but certainly a lot of guys to talk about. You mentioned Evan Turner was another guy. Patrick Patterson, Jared Bayless, some of these other guys were just huge stars coming out of high school. So
yeah, I brought up Teague and
Teague was there. Yep.
Those are guys who are like outside this top 25.
Let's try.
You always try to look for those guys that are like way down that ended up being big. And
let's try to put together a top 10, maybe even a top 15 out of this class. And we've got some notes we've kind of talked about, but you brought up a great point. Again, if you have a thought on this, drop a comment below. Let us know on social media what you think about like injuries and Derrick Rose. Should Derrick Rose be the number one guy in this class, or should it be James Harden? I personally have James Harden because of the body of work, the longevity of it all.
I'm good with that because we're doing a re-rank.
We're doing a re-rank, yeah. Derrick Rose was a number 2.
Let's just go with that.
I have Blake Griffin number 3 just because I thought Blake Griffin, his career and his totality was tremendous. Is it better than Kevin Love? Is it better than Eric Gordon? Is it better than Jimmy Butler? Maybe Jimmy Butler's number 3?
Jimmy Butler's still pretty balling. Yeah,
he's killing it.
I might lean a little Butler at 3, but that foursome, Gordon, Love, Butler, Griffin, I like him. I like him in that spot. Yeah,
I like Kevin Love number 5, Eric Gordon number 6. Although you made a really convincing case in this podcast to make me rethink that a little bit. Michael Beasley, who's still, for me personally, my own bias, he's one of the most entertaining guys I've ever seen. Would have loved to really see him.
Fun guy. Yeah.
Interesting kid, really interesting kid. DeAndre Jordan, we didn't talk about him, blew up at Kingwood Classic, was a Texas kid. That's why I love those old events where we had no idea who this 6'10" kid was. And we left that weekend. Remember, we left that weekend. He went from unranked, unknown into our top 15, maybe top 15,
we were aggressive.
Top 10.
I think Renardo Sidney was at that tournament too.
That was another.
Got their first look at him. That was a special event as far as finding getting your first look. Monte Ellis, I believe, he would play in that event. I could be getting years mixed up.
Yeah. He would.
That Kingwood had a span of like 2-3 years where like a lot.
It was like the music
festival. It was the event of the year. Yeah, it was the event of the year.
It was unbelievable. Number 9, I've got Nick Calathis over OJ Mayo at 10. Jeff Teague, I think to your point, I have him number 11 over Jared Bayless.
Very good.
Chandler Parsons in a car accident really kind of shorted his career, but it was really interesting to see where he would have taken things in the game today. Evan Turner, I have at 14.
Etwan Moore, forgot about him. Yeah.
Who's that?
Etwan Moore.
Just a pro.
Not the sexiest guy, but what a player, dude.
Yeah.
He was a college player. He was a great player for, what were they, SYF or
SYF, yeah. SYF out of Indiana.
Luke Herringody, keep rolling with it. Yeah.
JJ Hickson at number 18. He averaged, one season had 10 rebounds a game. John Lure made a really good career out of his longevity. And then number 20, Justin Holiday, just another guy.
That would be a sleeper. The whole Holiday family.
Yeah.
Drew, we were high on Drew.
We were.
But that would be a lesson in genetics.
It is, yeah. Well, I think we've seen that now where we've overranked now with a guy like Seth Curry, where I think
genetics are important, man.
They are very important.
Pay attention in biology class.
Well, that's why I have
son's taking genetics right now, and he's a junior in college at MTSU, and he's taking genetics. It's the hardest class. It's a language of its own, and I'm kind of liking it. I haven't pressed him too much on it because I have always been one to say, man, do not ever underestimate the power of genetics.
Oh, you've got to win the DNA lottery. I'm with you, man.
That's part of it, dude. Yeah.
What comes down to it. Well, Jerry, this was a fun class. I think this is a class that we probably could do a 4-hour show and keep going down the list because there's so many guys, so many good memories. I'm with you, man. When I look back, this was probably one of my most favorite summers of my entire career. And a lot of it, again, it came down to the players on the court. And these were highly competitive guys that were unique in so many different categories. And really, to me, a historic class.
Amen, brother. I'm with you on that, man.
I love it.
Good ball.
Good ball. This was fun, man. I look forward to doing this again as we keep going through, and it'll be fun to kind of re-rank the classes in totality to see where they stack.
Oh, that would be fun at the end. Yeah,
it would be fun.
Class versus class. Yeah.
Well, Jerry, this was fun, man. I feel like we got to go find a late night spot in Las Vegas. That's what it feels like. We're back in those days where, we're getting 2 hours of sleep and we got to be back in the gym, the very next day. That's where I feel like my head's
These
at.
were the days.
So,
yeah.
Good time. All right, for Jerry Meyer, I'm Justin Young with HoopSeen.com. This has been a re-rank and a re-evaluation of the class of 2007. We appreciate you watching. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you like this video. Leave some comments below. Let us know if we're right, we're wrong, or we're just two old guys talking about basketball. Probably all those things in between. So, Jerry, we'll see you next time. Appreciate the time.
All right. Take care, Justin.